Hey folks, we're talking about Snap improvements and AMD hardware. Debian 11 goes LTS. There's Tails, there's Proton, there's ClamAV. It is a fun-filled episode and you don't want to miss it, so stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is the Untitled Linux Show, episode 165, recorded Saturday, August 17th, The Onion Ring. Hey folks, it is Saturday, and you know what that means. It's time to get your geek on. It's time to get geeky and talk about Linux and open source, all that good stuff. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's the Untitled Linux Show, and of course, it is not just me. We've got the whole crew here today. We've got Ken, we've got Rob, we've got Jeff, all in, I think, their correct places.
No.
I get in trouble every once in a while if I have people in the wrong place. Oh?
Me and Ken are swapped.
Well,
I can understand, how you can tell.
You can the magic of editing. I guess I should have told you to hang on first. So, Rob, you are going to start us out with something that no one's going to have a problem with, not controversial at all. We're going to talk about snaps again.
All right. Yep. So, after years and years of snaps being horrible, I came across an article on Phronix this week about Canonical finally making improvements to snaps, making them ahead of the Ubuntu 24.10. Well, it's about time. Okay, I speak a little tongue-in-cheek here, but we all know improvements are needed, so let's dig into what they are improving. So first thing I came across reading this article is the addition of a progress bar in the dock for snaps. So I had to dig into this at first. I wasn't really clear. A progress bar for what? So after going down the rabbit hole, I had to dig a few links deep and really kind of look at the original blog post and see what this is all about. And what it is snaps. It's for snap programs when they're being updated in the background, and the icon is in the dock. It will now show a progress bar of its updating progress. So it's probably similar to kind of how updates work on cell phones, where like the icon will gray out and you get a little indicator. It's not quite a bar always, but you get various ones depending on what you're using. So I think it's kind of like that. Cool, great. So along with this comes clear prompts when you are running snaps that have an update available. So, if you're running it and it's not up to date, you know that you can restart it, I guess, and get to update. The next thing in Canonical's post is improvements to how Snapd handles the latest NVIDIA drivers, which will improve Jeff's experience using snapped versions of Steam with his NVIDIA GPU. Next, they talked about seeded snap tracks for desktop apps. This one was even more confusing, at least from whatever. I didn't know what they're talking about. So I dug into this, and yeah, their discussion was tough to make sense of. But here's what I think I got that they're doing. The old tracks, it went from latest stable and then had the Ubuntu version that they're for. And all apps followed that. The new tracks are going to separate out Ubuntu software and their App Center, where their third-party software is. So currently, I guess when users install Snapd Store snaps, they receive like the old Ubuntu software when installing, latest stable, and the new Flutter-based. And the new Flutter-based App Center, it's only available on latest stable Ubuntu 23.10 and newer releases. So if you're running older, you get the older. If you're running the newer, I think you can get the newer. So this allows Ubuntu, I guess, to continue to support their snaps in older LTSs, kind of maintain that line that they have going, and on the same app version for years, while allowing users to install the new App Center and then get the new software. So if I'm wrong with that, if somebody else understood that different, please correct me. I'd love to share with the world where I was wrong. And so would Jeff. So finally, I'm not quite done yet. Unless you have something to cut in for.
No. Go ahead.
All right. So finally, the App Center. The App Center Manage page has improvements, including these highlights. The available updates section now refreshes its list automatically after updates are applied, and open snaps that can't be updated are clearly messaged in the Manage Center. And it doesn't affect the all or update all actions. So to wrap this up, it's good to see they're making improvements. But if you ask me and pretty much all the commenters on the internet, these aren't necessarily improvements we were looking for. One of the commenters, one of them that I read, and I completely resonate with this one. He says, quote, "Now, only if you could stop making a mount point for every app, which slows everything down." I'm not sure if it really slows things down, but just seeing all that mess cluttering up my system drives me nuts. Maybe if our systems were obfuscated more like a mobile operating system, mobile operating systems are today, snaps would be fine in that aspect. But Linux users dig into their systems and they see that mess, and I just hate that mess. So snaps are improving, maybe not quite where some of us would like to see them, but step forward.
Yeah, so there's one particular problem with snaps that I've been hitting, and it's related to the security thing. So I'm involved in the Meshtastic project, and we have people that want to be able to flash their nodes, so put new firmware on their nodes off of the browser, because Chromium now has, I think Firefox may have it as well, but Chrome-based is where we really support it the most, has the web serial, which is actually pretty cool, because then you could do things like flash firmware off of the web browser. But if you're running it on Ubuntu and you're running the Chromium Snap, it just doesn't work, because because Snap applications just don't have the permissions to do it. So I was kind of listening and reading and hoping that they finally fixed that. And as far as I can tell, they didn't. So we're going to be sad pandas for a while longer.
Nothing like that at all. Just fancy little progress bars in.
I mean, the sugar, the visual sugar is nice, but it'd be nice to fix some more real problems. It sounds like they have, though. Like they've got some things in the gaming world, some applications on Steam that are going to start working because they fixed things. I mean, that's cool. No, it's there's some good stuff. Well,
the Snap Steam should work better, especially if you're using NVIDIA.
Well, and they're trying to make it open more so that other distributions can hop on the Snap bandwagon and let others open up their own Snap stores and whatnot. So they're trying to make it better.
Yeah, it's getting there.
Has anyone other than Ubuntu adopted that yet, though?
I don't know if it's fully ready for that yet.
That's a fair point.
Well, no, they've adopted it when they start making distros based on Ubuntu Core.
That was something I noticed in here. I don't remember if Rob mentioned it or not, but Ubuntu Core, that's their take on an atomic desktop. And it's going to be based on snaps, which will be interesting. That would be great for some people, I think.
Well, the person they hired to make it more easier to port to other distributions, I think he's only been hired for about 3-4 months, so it's kind of short yet to see the results of that work yet.
Like 3 months is barely enough time to figure out where your desk is at.
Probationary period.
Hopefully he's found it by now.
Probationary period is only 6 months, so you better have something to show for it by then.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about some hardware. It's Jeff, the hardware guy, going to have to take the hardware corner for a minute, and we're going to talk about some fun AMD chips.
I am. So last week we talked about the new AMD 6 and 8 core parts. This week is the second half where we talk about the Ryzen 9 9900X and the Ryzen 9 9950X, or the 12 core and 16 core parts respectively. The Ryzen 9 CPUs are geared for server loads, database work, simulation programs such as chemical or fluid, content creators, things like running Blender or doing large video projects. They can play games, but that's not where they really excel at. So you're going to hear that a few times in here. So anybody thinking, well, I really want to use this for gaming, that's not where you want to go. These chips do a lot better with high CPU loads, things that can really take advantage of the 12 and 16 cores in parallel. And honestly, if you want to play games and that's your main thing, the 7800 X3D is still the king of the heap. Now, when is the 9000 series X3D parts coming? I don't know. I've heard September, but that was a rumor, and I haven't seen it substantiated past that, so it may or may not happen. But games, wait for the extra cash. Now, the Ryzen 9 9900X is a 12-core, 24-thread part that features a 4.4 gigahertz base clock and a boost clock up to 5.6 gigahertz. The 9900X also has a 120-watt default TDP and 64 megabytes L3 cache. And it's priced at currently it's going to be release price of $499 US. The Ryzen 9 9950X is a 16-core, 32-thread, flagship processor that has a 4.3 base clock with a maximum boost clock up to 5.7 gigahertz. The Ryzen 9 9950X has a 170-watt default TDP and a 64 megabyte L3 cache, and it's priced at $649. So now Michael Larrable over at Phoronix has done his run of 400 benchmarks again on these CPUs and run a lot of older Ryzen chips and lots of Intel chips. This is what he did with the last one that we talked about last week. But he does mention that he removes some of the lower-end CPUs so the charts would be a little more readable. Mm-hmm. When you have real low-end hardware, sometimes the scale really has to scrunch down to make everything fit. So he just cut off some of the bottom tail so that we can focus better on the actual results. Now, the hardware and software setup was the same as it was for the last week's test. Ubuntu 2404 LTS with Linux 610 kernel, GCC 13.2 as the default compiler. All motherboards were using their latest BIOS. They all run the 2 terabyte Corsair MP700 NVMe SSD. The graphics was Radeon RX 7900 GRE GPU. The DDR5 compatible chips were using two 16 gigabyte DDR5 DIMMs running at 6,000 speed, while the older, like the Ryzen 5000 series, was using two 16 gigabyte DIMMs of DDR4 at 3600. Now, keep in mind, those speeds are where you have unity with the memory clock, so that's the best speed you're going to get. If you go faster than that, then your memory clock is not keeping up and you're waiting cycles for things to sync up again. So for the later processors, it's 6,000. For the older processors, it's 3,600. Now, as I always say on these large benchmark runs, take a look at the article in the show notes if you have a specific workload that you care about. These chips might be worth investing in, but it's going to be situational. Looking at the overall mean, the geometric mean, which takes out some of the flyers, we've gone over that in the past, the 9950X came out to being 17.8% faster than the Ryzen 9 7950X. So that's a pretty good improvement. The 9900X was 21.5% faster than the 7900, and the 9950X was 33% faster than the Intel Core i9 14900K, and even the 9900X was 18% faster than the Core i9 14900K. Now, for those still on AM4, the 9950X was delivering 1.87 times the performance of the Ryzen 9 5950X processor. So it's edging up on double the speed there. Not quite, but big improvement from the 5000 series. So I'm going to add my own information here. But if you look at a lot of the online reviews in Windows, they tend to focus a lot on gaming, and those benchmarks are not that much of an improvement. It might be the choice for, some of it might be the choice for AMD when playing a game through the Windows software. They park some of the cores so they don't get the delay across the NUMA node. So this is the Ryzen 9 chips. Now, this doesn't seem to have paid off much And while Linux benchmarks come in favorable for the new chips, the Windows ones are rather mediocre. Now, sites like Level 1 Techs, which do both Windows and Linux benchmarking, said the same thing. They feel that Linux was much more prepared for this release, and the speed increase is a lot more in Linux than Windows. So now that really kind of says that you have to look at what you're doing to see whether this is going to be a bump in performance or not. Now, one place that a person really needs to look and see if you want to upgrade is using something that relies heavily on the AVX 512 instructions. The 7000 series of chips had a double pump method of working with these instructions, which is where they break the instructions into two operations because the CPU can't handle the full instruction width. The 9000 series doesn't have that and can handle them directly. So if you have AVX 512 workloads, they will see a very large speed increase. Now, Intel doesn't support the AVX 512 instructions as they're trying to get people to buy their Enterprise, which do support the instructions. So take a look at the article for full details and know there are not really any gaming benchmarks in here because that's not what these chips are for. And universally, everybody agrees these are for playing games after you do a majority of your workload and you still want to play. Yeah, it'll play. If you care at all about the performance of games, wait for the X3D chips. These do not fare well. I mean, they're okay, but they're not gaming chips.
They're workstation chips. These two in particular, they're really workstation chips. Now,
yes,
are people thinking that there's also going to be a 9000 series Threadripper?
They are, but it's rumored to be.
Right.
So again, it hasn't been substantiated, so I can't say that for sure it is, but it's rumored that there will be. And that's kind of where you kind of think of these chips as kind of a poor person's Threadripper.
They're stepping stone between the two.
Yeah. Instead of paying for the full, say 50, 128 core chips, or you go down to the Threadripper chips, which have a lot more PCI bandwidth, things like that, but they clock slower. These give you a little better clock, less PCIe bandwidth, and they kind of cross in that straddling between gaming and home PC use and where you'd use a Threadripper.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. You have to kind of figure out like what am I doing with the chip? Do I want to game? Do I want to be able to compile? Am I doing a bunch of multimedia stuff? And then find out where the sweet spot is for you.
Yeah, because some of the benchmarks, they run slightly faster than the 7000 series and even not that much faster than 5000, so it's not worth it. But certain ones, like especially AVX 512, holy cow, if you care about that, these things blow the old stuff out of the water.
Yeah, and I want to say there are some things in AVX 512 that are really interesting general speed ups if you compile for it. And AVX 512, is that x86 v4? I think it has the 512 stuff in it.
I thought it was 3.
It's 3 or it's 4. I honestly can't remember which. I don't know what we're up to now, but one of them has it, and you can actually do some really interesting things like doing your string comparisons using the AVX 512 instructions, and those people are starting to see some very impressive speed ups as a result of being able to do that. And so, once upon a time, AVX 512 and all that was almost considered like toy instructions or instructions that nobody on their home computer really cared about. But they found some places where it really makes sense. And so I think we might hear more about that to come. Intel may get forced to start putting them back into their consumer chips. We'll see.
I kind of wait to see if they are going to do that or not. If they're going to kind of knuckle under and say, you know what, oh fine, we'll support them.
I mean, it's gonna come down to, so AMD is supporting the AVX 512 on all of their chips. It's going to come down to how important people think that is, and really, what it's going to come down to is Windows going to start compiling for those instructions, right? So, like, if people start seeing a big speed increase running AMD chips because it's got AVX 512, then Intel, I think, would be forced to.
They used to. They used to support it on their consumer CPUs. They stopped after.
Yeah.
I remember it was a 12 series or 11.
Yeah,
I forget now.
It's the weirdest thing because Intel did support it and AMD didn't, and now they've swapped. And it's just a weird choice by Intel to stop supporting a instruction set in their CPU
that they brought out.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why they get tired of having to do that.
Well, they didn't want the high end, their i9 chips to cut into their Xeon server chips.
Yeah,
and their enterprise chips.
I see a question from Inquiring Mind about the sync close flaw and 3000 series chips. And honestly, I've not taken the time to look into sync close yet, so I don't know the answer. As soon as I do, though, I will let you know, because that is an interesting question. But I don't yet know, so I will continue to do some reading about it. While I do that, Ken is going to tell us about something interesting with Bullseye, not Bookworm. Bookworm is Debian 12. That's the one that's most recently out. This is the one before that, Debian 11 Bullseye. And what just changed in 11?
Well, Jonathan, according to Bobby Borisov, Debian has transitioned its version 11, codename Bullseye, from regular security updates to a long-term support phase as of this past Thursday, August 15th, 2024, just to make sure we've got the date correct. Bobby points out that this shift comes exactly 3 years after Bullseye's initial release. He explains that each Debian release, including Bullseye, typically enjoys 3 years of regular support from its release teams, followed by 2 additional years under the long-term support or LTS umbrella for a predictable life cycle of 5 years. That's got 5 years of supported use from the original release date. The LTS phase started, as I'd said, on August 15th of this year and runs until August 31st of 2026. That gives you that full month. If you wait until the very last second, you procrastinators, to upgrade to get switched over. Now, the Debian LTS team will take over the responsibilities of the security and release teams, focusing solely on critical, I repeat, critical security updates and essential fixes during this period. The good news is this will give users time to upgrade to Debian 12 Bookworm, the current stable release. I would recommend marking June 10, 2026 on your calendar after upgrading to Debian 12 to remind you when Bookworm will transition to its own LTS phase. Bobby is kind enough to include a link to LinuxEAC.com's step-by-step guide to upgrading from Debian 11 to Debian 12 if you need assistance. Bobby also says users need to be aware that while most packages are covered under LTS, some may not be supported, and he provides a link to the Debian-security-support package, which checks for and notifies you of any non-supported packages critical to your system. Fortunately, I upgraded my Chromebook's Linux partition to Debian 12 last summer.
Mm-hmm. You know, for the longest time, Raspberry Pi with the Raspberry Pi OS was still continuing to push Debian 11 for 32-bit. It looks like they've moved away from that now, as far as I can tell on their website. I'll have to pull up the actual flashing tool and see if it does the same thing. But that was kind of a weird thing where the older versions of the Pi, they were by default putting people on 11, and people would come and say, it doesn't work. Are you running Bullseye? You need to run Bookworm. Yes, Bookworm will work on your Pi. I don't know why. So yeah, it's time to go to 12. But Bookworm is great. It's time to do it. Let's leave Bullseye in the past.
Yeah, I was thinking those stable releases are very much like Red Hat Enterprise. You know, it's just very slow and stable, and
oh yes,
Yeah, that bullseye's been shot off the wall. Time to take it down.
Yep. All right. So I saw that question. Like I said, from Inquiring Mind, I went and I did a little bit of reading, and AMD has actually come out now very recently and said that they will actually be releasing patches for the Ryzen 3000 series for the sync close flaw. And this is a deal where they tried to worked around one potential problem and accidentally caused another one with some memory remapping to fix one problem. But August 20th, they are planning the Ryzen 3000 series fixes for sync close. So if you're on a 3000, then know that that's when it is coming. All right, let's talk about Tails. Everybody's favorite browser that we hardly ever use.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about Sonic and Tails, if you remember the game Sonic the Hedgehog.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm not. So, but that was a fun game many years ago. That was probably before your time, Jonathan. But
I know Sonic and Tails.
But way too often on the internet, I see new users trying to use Linux distributions like Kali Linux because they hear it is for security and they think that means privacy. Well, PSA, Kali is purpose-built for things like pen testing. The security that it is like offensive and defensive. It's not a general purpose distribution for your own privacy. It's not good at that for all. For privacy, you want a distro like Tails. So I don't know if we've talked much about Tails before, but this week Tails has released version 6.6. So I thought it would be a good time to bring it up on the show. And Tails stands for the Amnesic Incognito Live System. Fun name once you know the acronym. But Tails is a security-focused Debian-based Linux distribution aimed at preserving internet privacy and anonymity. It connects to the internet exclusively through the anonymity network Tor. Tails is designed to be anonymous as possible, preventing all manner of tracking and surveillance while being extra portable. Tails is a live bootable Linux distribution that erases every last trace of all activity each time the system is shut down. At least that's in their words. I haven't done the testing to confirm that every trace. That seems like a lot. But anyway, they do the best they can. So now that we know what it is, let's dig into what's new in 6.6. As with many Linux releases, this release supports new hardware such as new GPUs and Wi-Fi cards, which is good if you want to bring the thing around and run it on various systems or whatever. It has better error handling when starting up. Persistent storage was improved by increasing the maximum wait time to 4 minutes, which seems like a long time to wait, but anyway, it's mostly the first time you use it. So by increasing that to 4 minutes when unlocking the persistent storage before returning an error. So this prevents freezing and allows the creation of the persistent storage after starting a Tails USB stick for the first time. So after that, it shouldn't ever take that long. But it's USB drives could have a lot of various speeds. You never know what you're getting into. So if you're running on something slow, you just may need that time. You can now enable multiple network interfaces, not just the one. And then a list of bug fixes have also been addressed. Stuff with the cloning and other bugs got squashed. So if you're looking for privacy on the internet, Tails might be the distro for you. You could carry it in your pocket on a USB stick, run it on your personal computer on a USB stick, at a friend's house, say, hey, can I reboot your computer and just boot up into this and use it, or wherever you're at? You can just run it on your USB stick.
Yeah, it's super useful for, well, being able to get to something anonymously without giving yourself away and not leaving any breadcrumbs. Very useful. Is Tails with Tor? Is that what Snowden used? It seems like it. It seems like it was. I know that's been a long time ago. But.
That sounds right, but I don't know.
I think
I was going to say I
Snowden
think
did
so.
use the Onion Ring, the Onion Network.
Yeah, I think so.
The Onion Ring.
Well, those are good too.
And there's the show title, The Onion Ring.
Yes. Yeah, that's what happens when you run Tor over a token ring network. You get the Onion Ring. Oh, that's great. One of the
token ring and the Ethernet.
Yeah, one of the things that always has worried me just a little bit about Tails is that you're running an old, like by design, you're always going to be running a slightly old browser, and sometimes browser fixes need to happen in a hurry. So that's like the one thing to be aware of is keep an eye out for updates to Tails because of updates to the browser.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff is old. I think when I was looking at it, the current one they have, I think it was the kernel, is in the life in like December. Or was it the distro that was based on?
That's currently out there. Yeah, so it's powered, it says, by the 6.1 LTS. So that is supported through December of 26. So the kernel is going to get support releases for a while, just as long as they stay on top of that, the LTS. But the browser itself is the one that I would think about.
And also good news is it's, according to Marius's article, it's based on the latest Debian 12 bookworm.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I think, you have to worry about it being a lot of out-of-date, potentially insecure stuff, but at the same time being a system that, there is some persistence to it, as I mentioned in one of the key features. A lot of it isn't persistent. Hopefully that would avoid anything permanently getting on there, but
it definitely helps. All right.
I'll say inquiring mind says, but it won't matter because any infection will not get saved to the USB stick. The problem is you could have an issue that would expose the data you're at now. Maybe you're doing some banking or something, and they're able to catch the data in memory or something like that. It doesn't have to be saved to the USB stick to get you in trouble.
Reboot often, especially if you're doing anything sketchy.
Yeah. Well, so
if you're doing something sketchy, reboot before you go to your bank.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to think about what your threat profile is, right? Like, are you a Snowden, and are you worried that someone from the NSA is trying to figure out what you're doing? Well, then you take your USB key and you plug it in and you do what you got to do. You don't, you're very careful about your computer hygiene, and then you take your USB key and you destroy it. And then the next time that you need to do this, you go to a different store and you buy a new one, and you go to a random library or coffee shop and borrow somebody's computer and put Tails on it, and then go to a different,
Get a whole bunch of USB drives, burn Tails on all of them, and have them single use.
There you go. Because but when you're talking about going head to head with advanced persistent threats with groups like the NSA, they've got tools to literally get from, if they've got a 0 day in your browser, they break out of the browser sandbox. And then there are literally vulnerabilities to go and to overwrite the BIOS on the computer that you're working on. It's UEFI now, I know. The firmware on the motherboard of the computer that you're working on. And so it's just, if you're up against that kind of a threat, it's a much different threat model than I'm going to go look at something sketchy and I don't want to leave any tracks, right?
Yeah,
so that's
your threat model. Point. Just give up.
Yeah, well,
Make
and
better
I'll
choices
say
with
this.
your life.
I really enjoyed reading the book Skunkworks which had to do with Lockheed Martin and their think tank, where they came up with like the SR-51 and the stealth fighter and all that. And you think, wow, this is great technology. And then you think, oh, wait, this is what they declassified and let out. So whatever you know that the government has, you better figure that they're about 3 steps ahead of that. So
yeah,
if you're going into sketchy stuff, you better be hardcore into this, and be able to really predict what they could probably be doing.
Yeah, it is fun that every once in a while we get a little peek behind the curtain, because something like Stuxnet will happen and it gets out, and then you do get to take a look at the sort of things that the U.S. NSA, and I believe that one was U.S. and Israel worked together on. So that's always fun when something sneaks out from behind the curtain. You get to take a look at it. Anyway,
what's also really fun is when they just release it open source, like they did with Ghidra.
Yeah, Ghidra is different though. Ghidra is all about figuring something, taking a binary, taking it apart, and figuring it out, which is excellent. I'm so glad the NSA did that. It's been one of the coolest tools that the community has had for doing reverse engineering. Yeah, Ghidra is a little different.
Well, I think they're under legal requirements, because I want to say, at least in the U.S., I thought like the NSA couldn't give code directly to other agencies. They had to open source it. And I mean, there was something like that where it was...
that could be. That could be.
There's some... I'm sure there's some limitations.
I will tell you another little known secret about the U.S. government writing code. When a government employee writes code, it is not copyrighted. It is automatically placed in the public domain, which is why that the U.S. government hires contractors to write code rather than doing it directly. Let's move on. Let's talk about smart cache injection. Is that what's up next?
That is.
So
What
this
my
is
wallet needs.
yeah, mine too. So this is an upcoming CPU. Is this an X3D CPU, we think?
Well, that's a little hazy. Probably not X3D. Probably Epic. But so more speed up is coming to the kernel for future AMD hardware by the way of Smart Data Cache Injection, SDCI. Now, maybe home users will see it in the future, but right now they're targeting AMD EPYC server processors. Now, while a home user can purchase these, they go for several thousands of dollars unless you're doing very complex simulations or moving a lot of data in huge databases. The workloads most people see at home are going to run slower than the normal home use chips. Now, there's a new patch series getting ready to be introduced into the kernel, and the notes from AMD describe it as the following. So I'm quoting AMD here. Upcoming AMD hardware implements Smart Data Cache Injection, SDCI, and SDCI is a mechanism that enables direct insertion of data from I/O devices into the L3 cache. By directly caching the data from I/O devices rather than first storing the I/O data in DRAM, SDCI reduces demands on DRAM bandwidth and reduces latency to the processor consuming the I/O data. The SDCI AE, which is allocation enforcement, so Smart Data Cache Injection, allocation enforcement features allows systems software to limit the portion of L3 cache used for SDCI. So what this means is if you need something from an I/O device like a drive, it can load what you need into the L3 cache with possible limitations. So to utilize this feature, it also depends on the translation layer packet processing hints. And the really short version is this allows data to have hints on where the best location to put the data will be. For example, when you have a multiple NUMA node CPU, it can guide the data to the cache closest to the core that's going to utilize the data. So there isn't a delay of requesting the data across the NUMA node. And if that's still a little confusing, basically when you have these large multi-core chips, they break them into subsections. So not all chips share the same memory. All cores share the same memory. And some of them are grouped together, say like, let's take the 9950X. 16 chip or cores. 8 of the cores talk to one set of memory. 8 of the cores talk to another set of memory. Now they can communicate across that boundary. It's just slower. Now it's, maybe a nanosecond more or something. It's very, very fast, but on high intensity loads, that time adds up. So that's what they're trying to avoid here. Now, the article does note that this isn't clear if the latest EPYC server chips can support this, or if it's just future hardware this will be implemented. I'm sure it's going to become more clear in the future as AMD will reveal more when they fully release the patches. It should be noted, though, that the documentation for this feature has been in some of the AMD programmer documentation for the last year. So either the existing hardware or new hardware should hit the ground ready to go because the information has been there and people have been aware how to implement this. I'm sure we'll see how much directly putting the data into the exact location, bypassing RAM and speed it up. We'll see the benchmark soon. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I know a certain someone who will benchmark the heck out of it, Michael Arable, over at Phoronix.
I'm sure he'll try. I tell you, I don't know that this is something that Michael's going to easily be able to benchmark, because where this really probably makes the most sense is for networking. Like you're trying to handle a 100 gigabit per second pipe on a machine, or even bigger pipes on a single server. And so this can do things like your network card, instead of writing into the RAM for the CPU to pick up and work with, it can now write directly into the cache. And so, we used to talk about zero copy, meaning the CPU works on it right in RAM. Well, now when we talk about zero copy, we can talk about working on it directly in cache, and it doesn't even have to hit the RAM, maybe. Really,
I bet you AMD will let him borrow a server to test it out, because AMD's pretty good about some of the hardware he's able to test on. And sometimes it's a loaner, and he's got a $20,000 server or something that he can play with. He doesn't get to keep it, but he can play and just kind of because they want that benchmarking out there, because a lot of people look at Phoronix for the benchmarking, and
that's true.
He gets into some of the server hardware.
Yeah,
so you haven't priced out a server recently. Lately, have you? 20,000 really isn't all that expensive.
You can do quite a bit with 20,000, especially if it's one that you build yourself on something like a Supermicro chassis. You can really make a nice server, but you can very easily spend more than that.
Yeah, I was using a random kind of a number. I know what we run some of our servers at, and I'm not going to talk about that, but it's a lot more. And they are really beefy machines.
Yeah, I mean most business servers are less than 20,000, but you can easily.
Oh yes. Now, you can spend 20,000 on the CPU. Yes, Ken.
Is this going to be disabled by default, or is it going to be enabled? And how will that impact as far as security issues?
It probably will be like enabled in the CPU, but you're going to have drivers that specifically support it. And I don't know if they're going to be enabled or disabled. And as far as security issues, researchers will have to bang on it for a few months to find out.
Or years.
And that's where the limitation of what you can put in the L3 cache comes from. Because you can only you can limit to where the memory can go, and I think you can limit to what it is. So they're thinking of that as well.
Yeah. I will tell you kind of a sneaky little secret. Generally speaking, our threat modeling for computers does not include the idea of something malicious on the PCI Express bus. And so that's sort of going to apply here too. And so if you have something malicious on the PCI Express bus that's going to try to use this, it's going to be able to own your machine, no problem.
If you got something malicious on your PCI Express bus, somebody already has owned your machine, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, that kind of goes back to the last story where let's just say even something behind like an NVMe drive, if they can load something in there that gets into the firmware and can rewrite that firmware. Now, a lot of times it's locked down, so you can't, but say, you got a cheap drive off of eBay or whatever, and it can rewrite it. Now it's got in there, and because that firmware is corrupted, it can now contaminate the rest of the machine.
Yep. Although if it's the hard drive in particular, that's where it's very advantageous to have a software encryption layer, because good luck doing something nefarious when we're reading encrypted bytes off of the hard drive. Anyway, let's talk. Speaking of security, maybe this is where Ken was trying to go. ClamAV is doing something odd with their 32-bit support.
Yes, they are. I'm going to start off by letting you know it's been 6 months since Bobby Borisov last wrote about ClamAV back when they released version 1.3. This week, he's writing again about ClamAV, this time releasing its latest version, 1.4, along with an updated bytecode compiler. If you haven't heard of ClamAV before, it is an antivirus engine designed to detect Trojans, viruses, malware, and other malicious threats, often deployed in various settings such as Linux email servers, web gateways, and file servers. I even have it running on my home file server. Some of the highlights of this new release introduce a range of improvements tailored to enhance user experience and system security. One is ClamAV has broadened its capabilities with support for ALZ and LHA/LZH file formats, allowing for deeper inspection within more compressed file types. It allows more nuanced control over image fuzzy hashing, which helps detect visual similarities in images that can indicate phishing or malware. And there's a new dynamic configuration settings that have been included, so users can now toggle specific features directly through the configuration files, providing tailored operational flexibility. Now, ClamAV has upgraded from the RHEL 7 to AMD Linux for their build host. And if you didn't know this, AMD Linux does not provide 32-bit images. This has resulted in ClamAV no longer providing 32-bit packages for Linux. However, ClamAV users on 32-bit platforms can still build from source. This release also includes a range of other enhancements to improve the software's overall efficiency and usability, including better integration with modern build systems, refined error messages for easier troubleshooting, optimized performance settings for faster and more reliable scans even. Now, Bobby also includes links to the ClamAV's official announcement, download, and GitHub release pages in his article if you do want more information or you need to update.
Interesting. So I did not realize that ClamAV was owned by Talos, which is now Cisco Talos. So ClamAV is a Cisco product.
Yeah, I didn't notice that either.
Well, actually, if there was another link I was tempted to throw in, but I didn't. That went into some of the history in regards to that, and about the ClamAV itself does not have a commercial version.
Right.
It's actually, but it is included in some of the Cisco systems with a name change.
I mean, that makes sense, honestly. And so that makes it worth it for Cisco to put money into it if they're using it internally for stuff.
I wonder if it has any connection to their Cisco iron ports or anything like that, if they're using any of the same code.
It is embedded in some of their hardware.
Yeah, I'm sure they're using it where it makes sense to use it.
I was surprised. I didn't realize that it detected phishing. I suppose that's if you're using it on like a mail server.
Yeah, that would be the sort of thing.
Long time ago, I've used on a mail server.
I'm real fascinated by the fuzzy image hashing, and they're talking here about trying to detect phishing and malware with it. I have to wonder though if there's not somebody there thinking about, well, can you detect sketchy images, but also things like the term these days they use is CSAM, that's child sexual abuse materials. I would not be surprised if they are working towards being able to detect those things, which honestly, I would love to be able to just detect and toss into the trash any of that stuff on incoming emails, because nobody wants that surprise opening up an email. Yeah, so hopefully that's something they're thinking about too. I imagine it is, because that's really where that fuzzy image matching kind of became infamous, maybe we'll say. It was where Apple was trying to do it, and the way Apple was doing it, everybody was like, this is not a good idea, please don't. But something like this, scanning incoming emails, makes a little more sense.
That way your server can keep that stuff off of it.
Exactly. Because you don't want that on your server. It's bad. It's a bad day. It's not, no. We're talking legal liability, all kinds of bad stuff.
Jeff may tell us what we can want on our server and maybe even in our browsers.
Is it what's reflecting off your glasses, Ken?
Rob, what's the newest? What's the newest with a Proton VPN?
All right, so we've talked about Proton Mail and Proton Docs, but have we told you about Proton VPN yet? I think we probably have mentioned it in passing, but I don't know if we've ever gone too deep with it. So Proton, located in Switzerland, as we've mentioned in previous stories, is well known for its security. They provide a VPN with a secure connection, and they don't log your data either. So, all good things with the VPN. And did you know Proton offers a premium VPN for as low as $4.49 US per month, as high as $9.99, depending if you play monthly or for a year or for 2 years or whatever. But thanks to paid memberships, Proton is also able to provide a free version. With the app, you can use the free or paid versions of Proton VPN on virtually every OS. I'm sure it's not on like Redux or Redo or those real big niches, but Linux, Windows, Mac, Android, it's on all those. So the free version, it doesn't include as many features as a paid version, but it gets you pretty much everything a basic user might need who's trying to be a little secure out there in the world for free. But this week, there's one more paid feature that has been moved over to the free tier. Proton VPN's Chrome and Firefox extensions are now available to its free users. What makes this different than just using the Proton VPN app? Well, the key difference is specificity. When you use the Proton VPN app, all your data on your computer goes through the VPN connection, whether you're pinging from the command line or your browser, your email, or some other app. It all goes out through that. It's at the networking layer. But when you use the browser extensions, this allows you to only send your web browsing traffic through the VPN. So you can turn it on and off as your browser as you need it. And this would allow you to do things like open multiple browsers maybe and just have Proton VPN on one of them and have the other for locally, so you can kind of quickly go back and forth, split whatever you're doing, or keep your email or other services on your local connection. And because I don't know, maybe they have to come from your IP for security purposes or your SSH or whatever it is, while hiding your web traffic or securing it over a VPN. So, or maybe it's just convenient for you because maybe you just don't have full admin root access to your machine, but you can install extensions. So I confess, I'm not a Proton user, but I think many of their offerings, they've always been really interesting, and the place has been really interesting as a company, all the things they've done, and I've heard great things about them for a while. But now that I know that they have a free VPN tier, I didn't even realize they had a free one. I just thought they had their paid one, and I still feel like spending any money because I don't have enough money. But now that I know they have a free VPN tier, I think I'm at least going to keep that in mind. And there's a good chance I may install that extension somewhere. Also, I should say, Proton is not a sponsor of the Untitled Linux Show, but I think they have been a sponsor on the TWiT network before. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not. I don't recall. It sounds like I recall hearing them on here before.
I did go and check. They are not a current sponsor.
Okay.
Because I did want to make sure and mention that if they were, but not currently a sponsor, and I can't remember for sure if they have been in the past or not.
The only VPN that's a current sponsor that I know of is ExpressVPN, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, so I did want to. I was kind of thinking about this ahead of time because I saw you had this story, and I'm curious what you guys think. I would say if you're going to use Proton Mail, particularly for like something important where you really want to be hidden, you should not use Proton VPN. You should go use one of the other what's the bulletproof. You should go use one of the other sort of bulletproof VPN services to then talk to Proton. Don't do it all from the same company.
Yeah,
because then it's just one warrant to get all of your information instead of two.
Tails, ExpressVPN, Proton Mail, all these different vectors, they'll never find you.
So if you use Proton VPN, what email service would you recommend paying for?
I don't know. No, not Gmail. No, not Gmail. I mean, I use Gmail. I have nothing wrong with Gmail, but for this particular scenario, not Gmail. No, I honestly don't know. I'm not sure. This is not a thing that I spend a whole lot of time thinking about.
It's safe to say you use Gmail for certain things.
Comcast Mail.
I use Gmail for. Well, so I have my own email server for like my local business email, and then everything else is on Gmail, I think. So I use Gmail for a lot.
Mine's all Gmail. My ISP used to have email, but I don't have anything too crazy in email.
Yeah, it's true.
I haven't accessed it in years, but I bet I still could access my email account through Southwestern Bell.
Yeah. That's probably a Yahoo account these days.
Oh, you should get rid of that then.
Yeah,
you don't want one of those hanging out there.
My employer, if you leave, it's all locked down, and they're really good about nothing's hanging out there let's log in.
So IT works real directly with HR on locking out accounts as people get upgraded to customer.
Yes, upgraded to customer.
Upgraded.
I'm sure they also work hand in hand with legal with making sure that those emails don't get deleted, but they're there just in case they are needed at something in the future. All right, so let's chat about some Easter eggs in Ubuntu.
Yeah, this
chocolate?
one's
I don't know.
Wrong season.
What flavor are the Easter eggs?
Right color.
Wrong season.
There's going to be Easter eggs in the 24.10 Ubuntu release. So the Easter eggs are going to be about Wordy Warthog, which was the 4.10 release, which came out 20 years ago. So Canonical wants to do something special for the 20-year birthday of Ubuntu, and they're putting in a few things which are throwbacks to the original release. One of the things is the Wordy brown accent color, which can be used to tint your desktop. 24.10 will include GNOME 47, which will support the accent color. And upstream GNOME has it now. Since 2022, Ubuntu has been patching it in. So if you think, well, we've always had this. Well, that was Ubuntu patching it in, not from upstream GNOME. Now you can use the Wordy brown to color your UI elements such as toggle switches, focus rings, selection bounds, a number of Yaru icons, including folders, all sorts of good stuff. Another one of the things added is the login sound. Ubuntu has a login sound, though it was disabled by default in 12.04. So, though you have been able to re-enable it if you so desired. So, those that have turned it on or remember it from the old days may not remember the original sound. There's a link in the article in the show notes, which has an audio clip of the original sound. And if you're curious about the new sound, there's also a link to the article which has an audio clip to the newer login sound. The author of the article is still looking for more Easter eggs, and since there's a while before we'll see 2410, there's still time, for more to find their way into the release. He says he'll let us know if he finds more, or if any of our early testers run into Easter eggs. He wants to be kept in the loop and notified on what you found. Take a look at the article in the show notes if you're interested in some nostalgia. For me, I missed Warty as my first Ubuntu release I played with was 6.04, so I came along a little later. Before that, I was on like Debian and Caldera and things like that. Though I honestly forgot about, I've been using Canonicals on and off for quite a while now, but I forgot about the startup sound after all these years. And, honestly, what I do remember was Ubuntu was the first distribution I used that you didn't have to plan an entire day of loading and then manually going through and editing files. And, 20 years ago was a lot more command line required, and you had to really dig in to figure some things out. So, when I think back, I can see how far Linux in general has come. And, I love Linux and I love the future of it.
Still miss setting IRQs, though.
No.
Manually editing your x.org file. Not X11, your X or your sound preferences, manually loading in the stuff for your sound card.
The days when also was all it was, and so you could only ever play one sound at a time.
Yep.
It was fun when I was young and had a lot of time, but I don't think I could. I don't think I could do it if I switched to it these days.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, how long did that startup sound actually play?
Oh, probably the new one or the old one?
The old one.
The old one is a little longer. It was probably 15 seconds.
Enough time for it to finish booting up?
Yeah. Oh, no, come on. You had to turn it up, too, because those old hard drives sounded like they were chewing cement marbles. They were clacking and rattling. And
yeah. Goodness. The old days. Tell you what. All right. Well, that's been enough down the nostalgia lane. Let's talk about new fun stuff in Handbrake. I've not pulled out Handbrake for a while, but I've got a set of DVDs here that might pull me back into it. Ken, what's new with Handbrake?
Well, first, I want to thank Keith's 512 for sharing in the club TWiT Discord earlier this week Marius Nestor's article about Handbrake's latest release. They just released version 1.8.2. This is the second maintenance update to the latest Handbrake 1.8 stable series, and it fixes various bugs like an issue where an encoded file could be outputted with the wrong file name. That could be disastrous when using the queue on Linux systems. Handbrake 1.8.2 also fixes a potential crash that occurred when trying to scan deleted files. Why it'd scan deleted files, I don't understand. An issue that can cause some audio tracks to be dropped. That I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
And scanning of broken video clips that use reserved color matrix values. Now, under the hood, Handbrake 1.8.2 adds support for the latest FFmpeg 7.0.2 open source multimedia frameworks for video decoding and filters such as libvpx 1.14.1 and and for VP8 and VP9 video encoding, as well as libass 0.17.3 library for subtitles. Before updating Handbrake, please make sure you have no pending encodes in the queue, and be sure to make a backup of any custom presets and app preferences you have, as they may not be compatible with this version, especially if you are upgrading from an older series. Now, I'll be double checking after the show if I've got the latest one, because I didn't take time before. And if not, then I'll be using the FlatHub to update.
Yeah, interesting. It sounds like they've got a couple of nifty fixes there, and always good to get up to the next FFmpeg version. So good stuff.
Yeah, so we don't have to experience those audio dropouts.
Ideally, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not good in your permanently archived videos. All right. Well, I think it's time to get into some command line tips. Command line and other kind of tips. They're not all command line tips.
What?
At least 50% of the tips today are going to be command line tips, though, I think. Let's first start with Rob. Rob is not in the cool club. I don't think he has a command line tip for us. I think he has a cosmic tip for us.
Rob always messes things up.
Mine is not a command line tip. But since we've been talking about cosmic lately and it's going to be talking about more, I thought I would show you something I came across a few weeks ago. I think this was even before my vacation, but I got some time to squeeze it in and show you this. So, for those who are fans of Cosmic, I came across a GitHub repository. It is a Cosmic project collection. So, if you make something for Cosmic, a community, did I say it's community? Community repository. If you want to make something for the Cosmic desktop, you can make it, submit it to this project, and get it on here. So, if you look through what's on here, they have like a simple task management application for Cosmic, fan control, Cosmic web apps. So I don't know what that is, but I suppose it's kind of like progressive web apps, but using Firefox, it clearly isn't. Yeah, a good couple dozen on here, some applets, some Cosmic noise. So check out the show notes, or for those watching, it's at I don't know. Check out the show notes, or if you Google Cosmic project collection, it will probably come up. But it's a nice little collection of Cosmic apps that you may want to install when you get your Pop! OS or wherever you install Cosmic, when you get your new Rust Cosmic desktop all set up.
Very good. All right, Jeff, what is Reflector and what are we reflecting?
Okay. So Reflectors, this is something you probably didn't think you would hear from me, but it's a program to find the most up-to-date and fastest mirrors for Arch. I know, me doing Arch, right? What the heck? So sometimes after you install Arch, you can have issues with slow downloads, and with Arch, you download a lot as it's a rolling release. Reflector is a Python script, and it scans and selects the fastest and most synced mirrors based on bandwidth, response time, when the mirror was last refreshed. So Reflector will also update your mirror list so you can always have the best mirrors you're updating your system with. There's several options you can use, the most up-to-date mirrors over speed. You can also rate the mirrors by download speed. You can go by the country they're in. So Reflector can also limit your search to specific countries. It can run automatically so your mirror list stays up to date at the frequency you want, along with even limiting the list by protocol use. So how you get your software, which protocols used, you can filter by that. So take a look at the article in the show notes, and it'll show you how to install and run Reflector and get the best experience out of your Arch install. So happy updating.
I wonder if there is a version of Reflector that runs for Fedora, because occasionally this is a problem with other distros where there's just one mirror that, for whatever reason you're using, that's terribly slow. And, it's really bad when, of course, the big package like Google's Chromium or whatever gets used on that. And so you're sitting there, like everything else is done, and you're sitting there waiting for something, and it's at 50K a second. It's like, okay, this will be done eventually.
You mean Fedora doesn't have something like Nala, that Ubuntu or app-based distros have?
Remind me what exactly Nala does?
It's some people, it was originally a front end for apt, but it also includes a fetch command that allows you to fetch all your mirrors and show their speed for downloading the read files. So then you can go through and pick the fastest ones.
Nifty. I don't know if Fedora has something exactly like that or not. I know this is something they've worked on with DNF 5, I think it is. It comes in Fedora 41. But I just know this has been a thing in the past where I'm just sitting there staring at a download, like, please finish so I can reboot my computer and get back to work. All right, Ken, you've got part 2. You're gonna tell me how to do things on my Wayland machine.
Yes, last time, if you've watched it, I covered 2 X.11 or Xorg-based clipboard management utilities for the command line. This week, I'm going to be introducing, it's actually a Rust crate or library for working with the Wayland clipboard, which includes Rust-based implementations of the commands WL-copy, WL-paste, and the one I was glad to see, WL-clip. Now, I chose this particular implementation after looking around, since it had the most recent commits compared to some of the other projects about. Well, the first command, as I mentioned, is going to be WL-copy. And let me go ahead and switch to my command line here. And is that big enough for everybody to see?
Yeah, I think so.
Great.
Let me... Yeah, that'll work.
If not, I can do this.
Nah, that should be good, Ken.
Yeah, that works.
But there I've got WL, let's copy. What I'm going to do is pipe the echo hello US aliens into WL copy. And that basically is like putting it into the clipboard. And then I'm going to use WL paste to print it back out to the command line. And then I've also pre-typed in, so I'm not trying to type it in on the screen here, how you can use WL clip to watch your clipboard.
Oh, cool.
And there you see it's doing the thing. And David, do you mind if I quote you here?
Nifty.
So you're watching the clipboard there. So you can so a hacker could use this and wait for you to copy and paste your passwords.
Yes.
That would be one malicious use of it. Now, one that would be really nice to use is if you set it up so that instead of going to the screen like I'm doing here, you'd set it up to go to a file and just add it each time, so it would
a history.
Create a history of your clipboard.
That could actually be useful. I could see that being a kind of a killer app for it. Very cool.
That way, you could then go back and maybe use it to add those as snippets for programming purposes.
Cannot tell you how many times that I've lost something that I had in my clipboard and then I copy something else and it's gone. Or in KDE, there is at least a list of you can get your last 5 or 6 things out of your clipboard, but sometimes it's not enough. It's still gone out of the end of it.
and with Linux, you've actually got 3 different clipboards. You've got the clipboard, and then there's a primary and secondary.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that in the past. All right, I've got one for us that I've actually used a couple of times this week already, and that is you can do a git apply with curl. And you may not know that on GitHub, if somebody has a pull request, you can do, so the whole URL, it ends in the number of the pull request. You can just add a .diff to that, and it'll pull up, and you've got the raw diff there. Well, you can use curl to get that on your command line, and you can do a curl and then the whole URL ending in .diff, and then pipe, and you can pipe that directly into git apply. And rather than having to download and apply the patch or, apply it with patch, just all a one-liner there. So curl, you probably want to use a -L to follow any redirects. And then you might want to do a git apply -v to be able to give it verbose mode and see what it's doing. But for testing out somebody's patch, it's really pretty cool. Get curl the .diff URL piped into git apply. Really time saver. I like it quite a bit. Yeah, there you go. On all of your programming needs this week that I know everybody will get up to. All right. Thank you guys for being here. It's been a great show. A lot of news, a lot of tips. I've enjoyed it very much. I'm going to give each of the guys a minute to plug whatever they want to or get the last word in on something, and we will let Rob go first.
All right, a minute. I better talk fast. So, as you know, you can come connect with me at robertpcampbell.com, and from there you can find links to my LinkedIn, my Twitter or X, Mastodon, or a place to buy me a coffee. And with that, I want to have a shout out here to Linda Annenberg, one of my co-workers at New Era, who actually listened to the show recently and donated 5 coffees to me.
Nice.
And they said she didn't have to, but she did. She said, I work hard at this. And I said, you're right. I took those coffees. So thank you, Linda.
Awesome.
Now, didn't we previously figure out 5 coffees was a pizza?
Something like that.
Yeah. That's where the 5 coffees came from originally. So
there you go. We leave it to Rob's discretion whether he will enjoy 5 individual coffees or just splurge on a pizza. Up to you, man. All right, Ken.
Well, just want to remind everybody to back up, beep, 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 and then print out a backup.
Absolutely. All right, and Jeff.
Well, if you wanted to find me, I guess you could go to Rob's LinkedIn, and then you could probably find me because I'm connected with Rob. But I don't really have much to say, so it's going to be Poetry Corner this week. So rather than a beep or a rude error message, these words, file not found. Have a great week, everybody.
Oh, fun. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys being here, everybody here that was live, everybody that watched us on the download. If you're not a part of it yet, you should look into joining Club TWiT, scan the QR code. It's about the cost of a cup of coffee per month. And it is definitely worth it as a way to support Club TWiT and get access to the Discord, access to all the shows without the advertising. It is a great deal. The only other thing I want to mention is if you want to follow my work, you can find me over at Hackaday. We've got Floss Weekly there. It tapes on Tuesdays now and goes live on Hackaday on Wednesdays. And then we've got the security column on Friday. Have a lot of fun with both of those things. Would love to see you there. Other than that, have a great week, and we will see everybody next time on the Untitled Linux Show.